This is Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests today are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Well, thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Okay, and our man in Kiev, Ukraine, Ivan Kucherenko. Welcome to the show.
Hello to everyone. Glad to be here as well.
I would like to tell our listeners that we are starting today 10 minutes later, and it's not because either of us was late, it was because producer didn't show up until the few seconds ago to start the program, unfortunately. And I would like to mention that if that will be repeated, the show will be off. There will be no more Ukrainian show. So if you'd like to contact your Pod TV, asking them to continue, please do so. Thank you very much. Okay, let's now do a show. Still have 20 minutes available. Um, so what's happening is there are not much news on the front lines because same territories they can change hands several times a day, and Ukraine is extremely skillful to resist any attempts of Russians to increase their territorial gains. It doesn't work out for them very well, except that they're losing 1,000 to 1,500 people a day through the meat attacks and of other wonderful devices what they developed during the war. And what can I say? So the front line now is taken back to a so-called peaceful negotiations. Um, Actually, it's very strange negotiations. Russia is not participating because it has the same position at NATO, so there is no progress in that respect. So basically, it's wrangling between U.S. and Ukraine. So U.S. is pressuring Ukraine. Uh, you didn't give us enough. You have to give us also this or that, and if you don't want to give this, give us that. Give us some pieces of Donbass, or give us some pieces of something else, or we will exchange. Okay, you'll give us Donbass, and we will give you Zaporizhia. We'll give you something else what you'd like to have back. So this type of negotiations are continued. I feel you may disagree with me, but I have a feel that nothing at all weakens Ukraine as this endless negotiation. Understand the need for peace, I do, and I wish there will be a peace of some kinds. But unfortunately,
Not peace at any price. That's
not
really
peace of any price. It comes to that, but unfortunately, the negotiations are not with Russia. Russia has not yielded anything at all in the last year or so, where Ukraine slowly see with this situation is now actually I noticed in the last day and a half situation is changing. So if before whatever US would offer or asked or demand from Ukraine, so Ukraine either would agree or they would say, okay, let us think about it. Okay, we'll get back to you very soon. And now it seems to me that, especially according to Trump's new security strategy that slums Europeans, it seems to me the situation now is being divided on so-called diplomatic front lines between, on one side, it's Ukraine and European Union, and on the other side, it's Russia and United States. Because in these peace negotiations, unfortunately, U.S. is not acting as impartial third party. It's acting more and more on the side of Russia. So this is very difficult and very new development. I think Zelensky is doing very well, activating his European strategy. And now it seems to me he is realizing that situation with US may only get worse. So he is now spending much less time with US and much more time with European backers. Interestingly enough, I just read it half an hour ago that US offered help to Ukraine for next year, 2026, $400 billion. I'm sorry, $1 million, million, not billion. So it's very, very good development for Ukraine, except that a little country such as Netherlands offered $700 million. Jonathan, any comments on that?
Well, I would say now, first of all, let's reemphasize that Zelensky has stated unequivocally that he does not want to yield any territory to Russia. Any peace, that's off. And the European allies have also stated their unwillingness to yield any territory to Russia as part of a peace agreement. So that's a helpful development for Ukraine there, and and increasingly the amount of aid that is being given to Ukraine is coming more and more from the European allies, and not so much from the United States. This is actually in accordance. It is in accordance with Trump's newly declared national security strategy, which they have finally. Remember, I've said on previous programs that the Trump administration needs to formulate a firm national security strategy which clearly prioritizes where they are going to devote their efforts for military aid, military spending, and everything else. And this is still a work in progress. But also, what is occurring is that the military situation increasingly still does not favor Russia at all. And that is going to affect any possibility for for any kind of peace agreement that would favor Russia, because neither Europe nor Ukraine are going to support that. So this, to my mind, to my perception, still opens the opportunity. It still means that Ukraine still has the initiative for forcing a peace that is in its favor, still very much within its hands. So we're into the winter months now. Any counteroffensive that I have projected would probably not take place until the spring, when the odds are more favorable, and the air defenses of, say, Crimea have been more completely reduced. We have noticed that Ukraine is still continuing to reduce the air defenses of Ukraine, striking Russia's economic and oil infrastructure, and so all of the preconditions are being set for in my opinion, for a successful counteroffensive in the spring, which will more likely be able to force, at the very minimum, an armistice rather than a genuine peace. It is more likely now that we will have a North Korea, South Korea type of end to the war rather than a genuine peace. But right now, the United States, with its national security strategy, seems to be emphasizing more a re-emphasis on the Monroe Doctrine, and is also coming close to the strategy that I recommended in the Russian View of U.S. Strategy, which is that the United States should strive to be the world's geopolitical balancer, not its world policeman. So some may view that as a retreat. I would view that more as a favor of rebalancing, and that the United States should be more like the arsenal of democracy rather than the world's policeman. And it certainly should not be the world's appeaser either. We should not be giving free rides to those who would seek to expand their own empires at the expense of the rest of the world. So that's my take on it right now. But I am very cautiously optimistic that the Ukrainians will be able to successfully seize the initiative in the coming months.
Okay, Ivan, what do you think about this situation on the front lines, on diplomacy lines? How you see it?
I like Jonathan optimism, but don't forget that Ukraine is constantly being pressured to accept this peace deal, and according to the latest news, Trump administration is making pressure on President Zelensky to give up territories. So the process which we can see right now is more and more looking like the Munich agreement for Ukrainians, especially. Hopefully, Ukraine and the European countries are holding, because first of all, European countries remember what came after the signing the Munich agreement and awarding the aggressor with the territories. We all know that President Trump's knowledge of history is pretty weak. He pretty often can't remember what he said couple days ago, and of course he doesn't remember the events which were in the past and in the history. But as we've discussed, and always history is repeating, so I've brought a nice historical video for you today to watch and remember the history, and maybe someone will show this video to President Trump.
That would be an excellent move. If chess notation were being applied, Sasha, I would put 3 exclamation points put 3 exclamation points to the right of Ivan's move.
Excellent.
So let's watch this historical video.
Yes.
So our Prime Minister has come back from his third and greatest journey, and he said
that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you. We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again. We are resolved that the method of consultation shall be the method adopted to deal with any other questions that may concern our two countries, and we are determined to continue our efforts to remove possible sources of difference and thus to contribute to assure the peace of Europe.
there was no sign of British reserve as the crowds fought to get near the Premier's car.
Now that is a very disturbing yet very useful video, which should be circulated and disseminated not only to everywhere possible, but especially try to get it into the hands of the Trump administration. I would personally recommend that our producer, after this program, send this to his counterpart at Fox News, which they would be the most reliable ones, and most likely to be able to get it into the hands of the Trump administration and also to comment upon it. because it is a very useful historical parallel. And it points out the truth of another historian who observed, and you've probably heard the quote that believe it was Santayana who said, "Those who cannot remember who don't remember the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them."
Yeah. Does someone remember the name of that guy on a video? No one mostly remembers him. He was a prime minister who actually failed to stop Hitler when Britain has enough opportunity, and then they had to fight with Nazi Germany alone. Everyone remembers Winston Churchill, who won
he said you had a choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you shall have war.
Yeah,
and he was right.
Yeah, but that guy Neville Chamberlain, he probably considered himself to be a great peacemaker. He made a great peace deal with Hitler, and they signed a paper where they agreed that they will do business, they will do negotiations, they will do peace talks, they will not commit war against each other. Ukraine also has such a piece of paper. It's called the Budapest Memorandum. It was signed by United States, by Great Britain, by Russia in Budapest, and Ukraine was given security assurances, unfortunately not security guarantees, but anyway, even that document, they were written security guarantees instead of security assurances, without the specific mechanism of implementing those security guarantees. There would be the same result after the Russian invasion, and that's what Ukraine is now insisting on, that in order to sign any peace deal with Russia, any ceasefire agreement with Russia, Ukraine has to be provided with specific security guarantees, which will act by a specific mechanism of the guarantees of the United States, of European countries. Otherwise, Russia will continue their aggression in the meantime.
Yeah, I will also point out that last year, I believe, former President Bill Clinton admitted that he may have probably made a big mistake in forcing Ukraine to sign that Budapest Memorandum. So that he admitted in retrospect, but better late than never in some respects. But unfortunately, Ukraine still has to live with the consequences of not having been allowed to become at least a nuclear power, which would have very definitely deterred Russia from ever trying to invade.
By the way, Europeans are doing another very interesting thing that, as you remember, in all his peace plans, Trump is highly motivated by all kind of commercial and business considerations, part of which is to get his hands on the funds frozen in Europe, the Russian funds. It's approximately $250 million. Sorry,
or a quarter of a trillion, or a quarter of a
$250 million, about 250. Some people say 350.
Well, what's a few hundred billion between friends?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Europeans now activated a mechanism of expropriating these funds for Ukraine, in which case United States will never touch even a penny of these funds. And if that disappears, I don't see that Trump will be continue to be motivated to have any peace, because for him peace means money grab. If there is no money grab, he doesn't need this peace. In fact, US is doing much better off if the war is continuing, because he just made a statement that, look, we don't provide any help to Ukraine, monetary help, and as a weapons, Europeans are purchasing our weapons by paying a full price. There are no discounts, nothing. Full price. Okay, here is your weapons. Thank you very much. Have a great day. So I don't understand what's wrong with Trump that he doesn't accept this situation, which is in fact very lucrative for the United States. Another thing, what I'd like to mention is on this new security states. Part of the strategy is making friends with Russia, being friendly and nice to Russia. But wait a sec, the 58% of American citizens support Ukraine. 2%, only 2% of US citizens believe that Russia, Putin's are good guys. 2%, so 98% Americans conditioned that Russia, and especially Putin, is a great foe for United States, for all over the world. So how Trump can put on paper these ideas of being friends with Russia, John?
I think they right now that the United States is seeing China as the greater threat, the greater overall threat, and the lack of mention of Russia as a main adversary is probably the perception that Russia is not nearly in a position to threaten the West as Putin would like to have us believe. And I don't think that simply because the United States is not viewing Russia as the main adversary does not mean that they are going to automatically become allies. Because right now the Trump administration fully realizes that they have this more not really that cohesive a BRICS alliance facing them, because the members of that BRICS so-called alliance, they have their own grievances against each other, and they have interests which are contradictory within each other. They are not monolithic by any means. So right now the United States sees China as the primary adversary, and Russia at worst as a secondary adversary, which can be easily stalemated by Ukraine and the European alliance. So I would say right now there is, with firm resolve being displayed by Ukraine and its European allies, and the potential for unlocking those frozen Russian assets and being able to use them on Ukraine's behalf and to Ukraine's benefit, that the situation is not going to destabilize, that Russia will eventually be thwarted through just sheer economic exhaustion, as well as military exhaustion and potential military defeat in the spring. So,
Ivan, anything you would like to mention?
I just want to add, I totally agree with Jonathan, but I want to add that Russia is a great ally of China, actually, and
they really have that much choice. China is keeping them propped up in their war effort, more or less.
Yeah, and doing business with Russia means empowering the ally of China. So it's strategically wrong way, and it's very sad that Trump administration cannot realize it. That any okay, let's imagine that tomorrow the war in Ukraine is stopped, and Ukraine signs that peace deal or ceasefire agreement with Russia. Russia accepts all the benefits which Trump administration promised to them, all the business projects, etc., etc. American companies come back to Russia. Sanctions are lifted from Russia, and the Russian economy is not collapsing anymore. It's growing. Russia is producing, thanks to the economic support of the United States. Russia is producing more and more weapons. Western technologies are being returned to Russia, and they're using them in their weapons. And then at the moment come when the war between United States and China actually is going. who will be the ally of China? Or will be Russia ally of China or United States? Of course, Russia will be ally of China. And thanks to the economic support from the United States, thanks to the lifting of the sanctions, all that new weapons that Russia will build using that period of time when the sanctions will be lifted out from Russia, they will definitely will use that time to build more and more weapons. Then those weapons probably they will build that tunnel from Kamchatka to Alaska, which Trump promised. Which President Putin promised to Trump, and Trump was so inspired about it. And all those Russian tanks will go to via this tunnel on United States, or they will go and attack European countries, thanks to the economic support from the United States. This is nonsense. I don't know what are strategic advisors of President Trump and his team that they cannot understand that possible situation in the future, that Russia would be never ally of United States. Russia and United States was always an enemy for the Russia, for the Soviet Union. Every Soviet person from the time he was born and became older and older was influenced by Soviet propaganda and was influenced that United States is enemy of the Soviet people and now the enemy of Russia. United States is existential enemy of Russia. So what kind of any peace deals, what kind of business is possible with your enemy?
Given what you've said, there is no peace deal possible. So this is a process. It will require. Keep in mind also that during the Cold War itself, when President Carter first came into power, he had an attitude more similar to that of Neville Chamberlain. He was talking about how we should not have this inordinate fear of communism. And then unfortunately for Mr. Carter, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And it was then that President Carter's eyes were opened. He finally saw the true nature of the evil regime that was confronting him. And he initiated the grain embargo, boycotted the Olympics, and most crucially, initiated the major U.S. defense buildup in defense spending, so that all President Reagan had to do when he came into office was simply step on the accelerator, and increase the defense buildup. And
that's what President Trump unfortunately didn't do, because President Biden actually imposed sanctions on the Russia. President Biden provided Ukraine with military help, and President Trump actually had to increase it, increase sanction pressure on Russia, provide even more military help to Ukraine. What actually he promised during the presidential elections, that he will stop this war in 24 hours, that he will call Putin and say him, hey, Volodymyr, stop this war. And in case Putin
he overestimated his degree of influence and his ability to negotiate a peace, in not realizing that there are some people with whom you cannot negotiate, that their viewpoints are completely antithetical to your own.
I think that just one moment, Sasha. I think that it's not because of overestimating of his possibilities to influence Putin, but it's because of people in his team, like Steven Witkoff, who really think more about doing business with Russia, and probably thinking more about their own personal interest in doing this business than about the strategic interests of the United States. That's about it.
I would tend to agree with you on that one.
There are now signals that out of 5 hours that Vitkov and Kushner spent in Moscow with Russian delegations. 4.5 hours approximately were discussion of possible business deals between Russia and the United States, or between groups of people who represent Trump and group of people who represent Putin, and vice versa, and so on. So exactly maybe half an hour of that meeting only were devoted to a peace between Russia and Ukraine. So there is more and more evidence that Trump is not genuinely interested in the peace. For him, is a stepping stone of arranging all kinds of business deals and arrangements with Russia and Putin. And Ukraine is just an opening to get there. So I'm a peacemaker. I'm doing a peace between Russia and Ukraine. And then, oh, we'll do some deals here and there. No, he's talking about Ukraine peace as a very secondary and very not genuinely interested situation, because Ukraine very clearly explains that giving up the Donbass, where is all Kramatorsk and Slaviansk and all these fortifications, it opens up a door for Russia to attack Kiev and the rest of Ukraine. What there is not to understand for even Trump with his personality? What is there not to understand?
Well, the problem is that, as you've mentioned, that his advisors are not clearly communicating to him the reality of the situation on the ground and why Putin is trying to negotiate a deal that so strongly favors them that it simply opens the gates for a subsequent war after a very symbolic or very short period of so-called peace. It would be a phony peace. It would be a phony peace that would merely be an interlude or a prelude to a subsequent war in which the way to Kiev would be open, because Russia would already be in possession of the fortified lines that have so far successfully thwarted Russia's ability to take over large areas of Ukraine, and has inflicted enormous casualties on the Russian army. So, I believe that right now, what we are seeing is a contest of political wills. Well, Zelensky is digging his heels in. The European allies are digging their heels in. They're trying to get more resources for Ukraine. And again, I contend, from my perspective, that the decisive moment will come when Ukraine has been able to put together strategic reserves that are capable of taking advantage of the destruction of the Crimean air defenses, the logistical links, and setting up a decisive counteroffensive, which will have major effects on the political situation. Should Ukraine, basically what Ukraine has to do is what the Confederate States of America during the American Civil War tried to do. The Confederate leadership realized that they could not simply fight a defensive war and hope to gain an independent Confederacy. The logic of the Confederate leaders was, we must win a significant military victory on Northern soil, which is what gave rise to the campaign at Antietam and at Gettysburg. They were trying to achieve a major military victory on Northern soil, which would convince Great Britain and France to intervene in the American Civil War on behalf of the Confederacy. It is the same they were trying to duplicate the same strategy that was in the American Revolutionary War, when the United States colonists managed to gain significant enough victories that convinced France to intervene on the side of the United States. So right now it's a contest of political wills. They need to hold out and be stubborn enough, basically being able to teach stubborn to a mule. So it is to wait for the proper moment to inflict that decisive counteroffensive, which will then convince the United States that, hey, maybe because Trump does not like to back what he perceives. He does not like to back a loser. He wants to be on the winning side. So I would contend that if Ukraine can inflict that major military victory in a counteroffensive in the spring, that this will be the thing needed to push Trump back over to the side of Ukraine. So,
Agreed. I think, of course, it would be great if somehow Trump would came to the conclusion that situation is uncertain. Supposedly, Russia is a bigger country; they should win. But if they couldn't do it in 4 years, where is the guarantee that they will do it in 5th year or 6 years or thereafter? Now, Ukraine, on the other hand, is fighting violently. They are developing the state of the art, the war industries and the different setups to producing new type of weapons that will be in a big demand in the West, including Western Europe. And there are already a lot of cooperations between Western European countries and Ukraine in that respect. So Trump may come, okay, let's cut my losses for a time being. Okay, let me just distance. I have a doctrine of Monroe to take care. I have Venezuela. I have China. Is there? Why do I need this uncertain situation while I'm being criticized from both sides all the time? Nobody's happy with what I'm doing. Okay, keep fighting. Bye-bye. Okay, let me know. Give me a call when you need me. That probably would be not such a bad strategy from Trump.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree because from the standpoint of his national security strategy, as I said before, it comes close to, although not quite, to the kind of strategy that I've been advocating of the United States becoming the geopolitical balancer rather than world policeman, and relying more on its allies. So right now, the situation is still fluid. And I would say that we need to watch very carefully, particularly how the progressive reduction of Crimean air defenses and the Russian logistical and oil industries and the continual weakening of Russia's power position and its ability to continue any kind of meaningful offensive. It's very much a World War I style situation on the eastern front of Ukraine right now. But the Ukrainians, unlike World War I, they are not wasting their efforts. They are not wasting their efforts in fruitless counteroffensives directly against the Russians. But what they are doing is they are exacting an exorbitant cost from the Russian army and setting the state, and they are using those deep attacks and developing their own defense industry and continually building their strength to what I contend is setting the stage for a decisive counteroffensive early next year.
Okay, for Western Europe, what Ukraine means. I've heard it loud and clear yesterday from von der Leyen that Ukraine is the first line of defense for Europe against Russia. So
Agreed.
it's an integral part of European defense against Russia. So how come then that United States keep undermining Ukraine, which Europeans think that it's the first line of defense? How does it work at all, Jonathan?
It doesn't work very well at all because the Trump administration needs to be more consistent with its own declared national security strategy. If they're making China the primary enemy and Russia at worst a secondary enemy, then what they need to do is they need to rely more and more upon their European allies in NATO and Ukraine, which is not a member of NATO but might as well be. It's kind of a de facto member of NATO right now, the way they're basically successfully defending NATO's interests in an expanded alliance. So right now it is, I would say, we would need to conduct some information offensives of our own, particularly this particular episode today. I would say get it to Fox, and then in turn convince them, say, hey, you need to pass this to the Trump administration because there are some very valuable lessons which can be learned from this.
Okay, Ivan, do you have anything to add? before we finish?
Just I want to first of all thank our viewers and thank American people for support and Canadian people and all the European people, because without that support it would be really hard for Ukraine to keep fighting. And Ukraine now is doing a great job. Actually the NATO was created for, to sustain the expansion of the and to sustain the aggression of the Russia towards the Europe, and I hope that that help would be increasing but not decreasing, especially from the United States, and the national interest of the United States will prevail. The desire of President Trump and his advisors in doing business with Russia and Russians, because you cannot do business with your enemy. You cannot strengthen your enemy, and friend of your enemy is also your enemy, which Trump administration at least should realize. Russia is friend of China. China is enemy for the United States, and in the possible future future war. So it's better not to strengthen the friend of your enemy, because it will become your enemy in future.
Yeah, okay. Let's stay right after the program for another 10 minutes. I'd like to talk to you. And in the meantime, I'd like to thank you for today's program. And I'd like to say Slava Ukraini, Героям Slava, and hail to Ukraine and the United States and Canada.
And God bless America.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Ivan. I was going to jump in there, but you preempted me. Well, that's good. That's good of you. And a Merry Christmas.
You can say Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraine. That's good. God bless you. God bless Ukraine. Let God's blessings are meant for all those who are willing to follow Him. So
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.